just going to video and then we can go there.
Just ignore it because she's not there.
So anyway, so for the Hotel Del back in the mid-'80s, they really didn't have to, let's just say our sales team really didn't have to pick up the phone to source business, because the business was plenty. It was the only oceanfront resort in San Diego, much less Southern California and most of California itself. And plus it was owned by Larry Lawrence, and it was a historical monument. It had all the things that you'd ever want inside of a resort. So when I worked in that resort setting, very different than working at a Marriott, Sheraton, Hyatt, or any of those main chains. So a lot of our business was already incentive. So the incentive groups spend money. So in San Diego, anytime you get the incentive groups in San Diego, they're going to spend money.
Was that like in the 90s when that really became big though, like incentive groups for companies, do you think?
There's two, in my lifetime, there's two times that I remember major hits in the hospitality industry. And the rest of it, we had some ups and downs along the way. But the two times that I can remember that are very vivid is 9/11 hit. And when 9/11 hit, there was clauses inside the contracts for groups to have the ability to the act of God to pull out. So a lot of groups started pulling out immediately. And so I remember in my own department, and I was running Star Destinations, my revenues that year was the lowest they were ever in the 9-year period that I developed that company and managed it. So 9/11 was a critical hit, and now we're in another very critical hit economy-wise. And again, if the companies aren't spending money, then they're not going to be coming to any city, much less San Diego. So when you ask, where was the big boom, it'd have to be the 80s, even Las Vegas. They experienced a major boom from the 80s all the way up to almost present time. And now, I remember last year the Fontainebleau that was supposed to open up last year closed. They couldn't even finish the project because they ran out of money. And so that hospitality industry has been hindered greatly. And so
So it was like the 80s? Though,
80s were a boom. 80s were strong. 90s were...
for like events and stuff? Was like the 80s was when like big events really like started like...
Well, the Hotel Del, you have to see, it's a whole different experience at the Del. There's like when I worked for 15 years for the Sheraton, 2 different properties.
Yeah.
So the two different group mixes. The group mixes that would go to the Del are more in the incentive house groups. So the incentive house groups are there, the attendees are actually there on their bill. So they do a lot of fun things. Here's a perfect example. When I started Star Destinations back in, I think it was 95 or 98, one of the two. All the groups that I dealt with at Starwood Hotels, if they did group programming for the conference. So you come into the conference and they say, hey, we would like to send our group on a half-day trip to Tijuana. We're going to also send them on behind-the-scenes tour at Old Globe, and we want to do a wine tasting in Temecula, and we want to do all these different things. Well, back then, the group, the meeting planner would pick up the cost of the whole event. So I would just give them a budget and tell them this is what it is per person, guaranteed number of people they'd sign off on, we'd do the business. Well, what happened was right after 9/11, the groups changed. And they said, look, we want you to go ahead and market the events for us, but we don't want anything to do with it financially. So what I had to do, was I had to create a registration form online with a link so that the attendee could go in. So I would send the link out to the meeting. The meeting planner would send it out to the attendees. Then the attendees would open it up on their behalf, and they'd fill it out and fax it in. I had clean cut dates. If we didn't have our exact numbers by certain dates, we wouldn't do the program. Because now, before with the client, it was a lot easier on billing. Now I have to individually, for Tijuana, we used to have 80 to 90 people that go to Tijuana. Every one of those now had to be independently charged, either room charge or credit card charge, for them to go on that event. Where before I just master billed the client, the meeting planner. So those are the big changes, and it was right after 9/11 is what I noticed the biggest. Everybody started starting to cut back, and then.
So would you call that era would you give it a name for maybe how would you group that type of that so after 9/11/01, right? Is that when it happened, 2000?
And so after 9/11.
So would you maybe call the technical era, when people started using technology more for events and things like that,
Well, that's a good point, because my first contract back in the 80s was, I thought it was great that we had a fax machine, so I didn't have to FedEx stuff. But now, technology, that's interesting to say, because at Hotel Del we talked about the email, and how big that was going to be, and we could email people, and we'll cut back on paper products and stuff, which is a hoot, which I don't think really happened, but anyways. So back then, that was kind of believe it or not, that's kind of like caveman stuff, what we did then. We didn't, not all of us had computers.
Yeah.
So a lot of contracts were still done with, man, I'm really dating myself. It was done on a regular typewriter, but you're a real, stud if you had the little white tape that you could hit back and erase.
White out.
You were it was white out on. I mean, you had the thing, but anyway. So once it got into the computer realm, and then once we got into the email realm, which I was already on email starting back in the early 90s. So the early 90s really started the email spring. So 80s was building up to that. 90s started the emails, and then now. The biggest thing that's happened here in the 20th century, I think, is internet. Internet is just you can, you really don't need a newspaper anymore. You can go online, you can search words, you can search definitions, you can search venues. I'm doing a golf event next month, and I'm looking at catalogs to buy card amenity products, but I'll also look on the internet and cross-reference to see if there's anything new through those companies. So now